Welcome to this deep dive into the richly layered world of The Sinners, a film set in the 1930s Mississippi Delta, where fashion, spirituality, and ancestral memory intertwine. Directed by Ryan Coogler and starring Michael B. Jordan as a twin brothers Elias Stack and Elijah Smoke. The film explores identity, redemption, and cultural legacy, but beyond the gripping story lies a wealth of meaning stitched into every costume, color, and silhouette. In this video, we'll explore who the brothers are and how fashion defines them, the Yoruba spirituality roots of their story, especially the symbolism of the twins, the costume designs, connections to 1930s black fashion, gangster style, and Afro-Diasporic identity, and how this film connects to broader works like Black is King, showing how modern black creation reclaim ancestral stories through style. Who the brothers are, fashion, personality, and historical influence. Smoke and Stack are twin World War I veterans shaped by trauma, migration, and the fractured promises of the American dream. After returning from the war, decorated yet disillusioned, they head north during the Great Migration, eventually landing in Chicago. There, they fall into the orbit of one of the most mythic figures of the American crime, Al Capone. Their time working for Al Capone during Prohibition is more than a plot point. It becomes a formative education in power, fear, and presentation. Capone wasn't just a gangster. He was a master of optics. He understood that style could shield violence, that a white fedora could distract from blood on your hands. The twins absorbed this lesson, but internalized it differently. Smoke, the spirit walker. Elijah Smoke is a man built from silence, not just his own quiet nature, but the generational stillness of black men who've endured war, grief, and labor without recognition. His wardrobe reflects this, sober, weighted, and precise. Smoke doesn't dress to be seen, he dresses to endure. His style is grounded in grit, not glamour. Think Irish Gangster. He wears a textured blue-gray three-piece wool suit paired with a newsboy cap and simple shirt, no tie, no flash, no pretension. In this wool suit, flat cap, and muted tones, Smoke's look nods to early 20th century working class men, the kind who earned their stripes in bars, back alleys, and boxing rings. There's a kind of bruised elegance in his tailoring, tough fabrics, clean lines, no excess. It's more armor than art. His style leans less southern agrarian and more northern working class, evoking the look of black veterans and dock workers who navigated the line between respectability and resistance. The fabric is heavy, as if carrying memory. His palette, smoky blues, muted grays, weathered navy, mirrors the Mississippi sky before a storm. It's a color story of awareness, of spirituality, endurances, of unspoken things. And we will be talking about the blue, the colors that they picked later on. Smoke's clothes don't assert power, they absorb it. They're not designed to impress, they're built to hold weight. His posture mirrors this too, shoulders slightly hunched, as if he's bracing against both wind and history. And as a veteran, Smoke's style becomes a protest. He trades a government-issued uniform for something ancestral and quiet. Where Stack performs power, Smoke carries it, in clothes, in silence, in sorrow. Stack, the street prophet. Elias, Stack, is everything Smoke isn't or won't allow himself to be. Stack is a walking sermon of performance, charisma, and contradiction. Where Smoke sinks into the earth, Stack rises above it, floating through rooms like a deity dressed in silk and danger. His clothing is his belief system. Every crease is intentional, every lapel a declaration. Stack learns style as power from Capone and the street life of Chicago's South Side, where presentation could mean protection. But he blackens that blueprint, imbuing his gangster aesthetics with diasporic flamboyance and spiritual urgency. He dresses in a double-breasted Italian suit with bold pinstripes, a nod to the Mafia, yes, but also to the Zoot Suits rebellion. His ensembles are not simply fashion-forward, they are tactical arguments. Stack doesn't just dress well, he dresses to dominate. In his dark pinstripe three-piece suit, deep burgundy fedora, and coordinated tie and pocket square combo, he commands space like a man born to be seen. This isn't quite luxury, it's calculated spectacle. He wears suits cut sharp enough to wound, stitched with the precision of someone who knows the power of image. The pinstripe nod to Mafia codes, yes, but also to economic aspiration, to upward mobility in a world rigged against him. His accessories are meticulous. A crimson silk tie slashed with gold, like a wound dressed in glory. A pocket square folded with near military discipline. Ring, cuffs, and fedora tilted just right. Flair that's strategic, never sloppy. Stack's color palette is opulent, navy, burgundy, and cream. Each choice is loaded with intent. These aren't just clothes, they are declaration. He speaks in fabric, posture, and glare. Where Smoke is grounded, Stack is elevated. His style floats above the grim of reality, aspirational, performative, and dangerous. He doesn't just wear the suit, he weaponizes it. Stack also embodies the spirit of the black dandy, a figure born from survival and spectacle. Black dandyism emerged as a form of resistance. Enslaved or marginalized people using the master's clothing not just to mimic, but to transform power into performance. From Harlem Renaissance artists to Congo sappers, the black dandy says, "If I must be seen, I will dictate how." If you'd like to know more about the black dandyism, I speak about them more in my Met Gala video and my other African dandyism, and yeah, check them out. I highly recommend. I will link them below. For Stack, this becomes a spiritual hunger. His clothes are not just to stun, they are to transcend, to leave behind the pain of the Delta, of war, of abandonment. His tailoring isn't just Italian, it's Afrofuturist, in the sense that it imagines a version of himself not bound by history. Al Capone, Irish gangsters, and the dual DNA of gangster style. In Sinners, the contrast between Stack and Smoke is not just personal, it's sartorial and deeply rooted in the clash of two gangster style legacies, Italian Mafia, opulence, and Irish working class grit. Al Capone and Italian Mafia elegance. Al Capone, the infamous Chicago kingpin of the Prohibition era, was as much a fashion icon as he was a crime boss. He understood the power of image. Expensive double-breasted suits, camel hair overcoats, silk ties, and fedoras became his armor. This was more than vanity. The Capone and other Italian American gangsters Elegance was a weapon, a way to project authority in a world that sought to keep them invisible as immigrants. They weaponized style as a soft power, signaling success, untouchability, and control. In Stack's wardrobe, we see the influence loud and clear. The sharply tailored suits, the flamboyant colors, the meticulous accessorizing. His fashion is performative, a visual sermon on dominance and seduction. Irish gangsters and the aesthetic of survival. In contrast, Irish American gangsters, particularly in the early 20th century, embodied a different kind of menace. Their style was rooted in the urban working class grit. Wool suits, newsboy or flat caps, heavy boots, dark somber tones. They dressed like the neighborhoods they ruled, hard, blunt, and unpolished. For Irish gangs, like the White Hand Gang or the North Side Gang, their aesthetic was less about glamour and more about survivability and brotherhood. This is exactly the visual lineage that informs Smoke's style. His flat caps, rough wool, muted earth tones. His clothes are armor against the world, not a performance for it. He's not looking to be seen. He's dressing to endure, to survive. The system that brutalized men like him, both war and home front. The twin dynamic as historical collision. Smoke and Stack's contrasting styles became a visual dialogue between these two gangster legacies. Stack embodies the swagger and the spectacle of Capone's Mafia style, using clothing to demand space, power, and reverence. Smoke channels the underdog energy of Irish gangster, where violence simmers beneath the stillness and survival is worn like a second skin. Both styles were worn from immigrant and marginalized communities, trying to carve space in an American that denied them. In Sinners, these aesthetics clash inside the bodies of two black men haunted by war, legacy, and blood oaths. 1930s fashion and the politics of dress for black men. In the 1930s, clothing was rebellion. Amid the crushing poverty of the Great Depression, most Americans, especially black Americans, had very little, but what they chose to wear became a public declaration of dignity. For many black men, especially in northern cities, to dress well was to refuse invisibility. It was also to risk everything. Authorities often saw sharp-dressed black men as threats. The zoot suit riots of the 1940s would later explode because young black and brown men dared to take up space through oversized garments. Police and politicians linked flamboyant fashion with criminality and deviance. Gangsters like Capone used style as psychological warfare. Elegance became intimidation. For black men like Stack, the stakes were even higher: to wear a three-piece suit, while black was to mock the system that tried to erase you. But this wasn't mimicry, it was a remix. Black fashion in the 1930s did not just copy white templates, it improvised, blending high tailoring with southern flair, jazz-age aesthetics, and diasporic influence. Think wide brim hats, vibrant linings, hand-me-down coats, made regal by the way they were worn. Stack's wardrobe is this history in motion, an archive stitched into seam. Twinship as visual theology. The power of this film is that it doesn't just show two brothers, it stages a visual parable of duality. Smoke and Stack are mirrors. Each style reflects one path through trauma, through black masculinity, through spiritual longing. Stack seeks transcendence through presentation. Smoke seeks peace through grounding. Their clothing is both a shield and a sermon, but the film is careful to remind us that they are still twins, not enemies, and that's where their fashion becomes especially poetic. Look closely, a subtle shared fabric on Aleppo, a similar hat shape worn at different angles, shoes of the same make, but one polished and the other worn. Smoke and Stack's costumes are not just clothes, they are visual evidence of the metaphysical bond, frayed by trauma but still intact. As their journey arcs towards reconciliation, their outfits begin to harmonize again. Silhouettes align, colors soften, fashion becomes a language of forgiveness. Yoruba spirituality and the Ibeji, the sacred mirror in the story. In Sinners, the bond between Stack and Smoke isn't just familial, it's spiritual. To truly understand their journey, we have to look through the lens of Yoruba cosmology, where twins or Ibeji are not only common, but revered as divine. Ibeji in Yoruba culture. The Yoruba people of Nigeria have one of the highest twin birth rates in the world, and rather than treating twins as a medical anomaly, they are honored as a blessing from the gods. In Yoruba cosmology, Ibeji are viewed as two halves of single soul. They represent duality, joy and sorrow, war and peace, ego and humility. When twins are born, families often create twin statues or shrines. If one dies, because the spiritual presence remains, even if the physical is gone. This idea of twins being a sacred balance, a spiritual equation that must be maintained, is the center to Sinners. Stack and Smoke as Ibeji embodied. Stack and Smoke are not just brothers, they are spiritual reflection of one another. Where Stack embodies fire, performance, and ambition, Smoke embodies water, silence, and grounding. This isn't just character development, it's the Ibeji dynamic, rendered in narrative and costume. Smoke reflects the calm, maternal energy of Yemoja, the Orisha of the ocean, protector of children, often linked with healing and introspection. Stack channels the fiery, thunderous energy of Sango, the Orisha of lightning, masculinity, and righteous rage. These energies are not enemies, they are cosmic siblings, but if one overtakes the other, balance is lost. This is exactly what happens in the film. Smoke tries to retreat from violence, while Stack is pulled deeper into it. Their rupture mirrors are a spiritual imbalance, one that can only be repaired through reckoning and reconciliation. Color theory, red and blue as Yoruba codes.
Let's talk about the movie Sinners and the actual symbolism behind some of this. And this is not really a spoiler, but it's not at the same time, but you have to have watched the movie to understand. I've been seeing a lot of people talk about why the twins were red and one were blue and the symbolism behind that, but all y'all are wrong. Ryan Coogler literally said at an interview that he chose twins to embody the Nigerian Orisha spirits, the Ibeji twins. Now, the Ibeji twins in Nigeria is very symbolic. And some people believe that twins are supernatural or bad luck or some sort of bad omen. And the Ibeji twins are most depicted wearing red and blue. Because some people say that that symbolizes Yemaya, which is the mother of all. She is like a mermaid spirit, Orisha. And Shango, and his color was red. And Ryan Coogler, the man who made this movie, literally stated that in an interview, that is where the concept of the twins came in. Because so many Africans came from West Africa, and the movie is based on a lot of different African Americans.
The color choices in Sinners are not random, they are spiritually texts in themselves. Red, Stack, traditionally associated with Sango. Red represents passion, power, and justice, but also danger and ego. Stack's red suits, pocket squares, and even lighting cues connect him to the volatile force. Blue, smoke. Blue and deep indigo are linked to Umoja, goddess of water and maternal care. Smoke's denim, worn cotton shirts, and muted tones speaks to protection, sorrow, and sacred endurance. This red-blue dichotomy shows up again and again in diasporic art, from traditional Yoruba dresses to where the red and blue scenes signal opposing yet divine forces. In Sinners, it's used not just to separate their brothers, but to visualize their soul work. Spiritual wardrobe as prophecy. Their clothing tells the future long before the script does. When Smoke begins to wear darker hues or cleaner silhouettes, we sense a return for center, a spiritual rising. When Stag's red turns to a darker maroon in later scenes, it suggests the weight of his actions catching up, a fire beginning to dim. And in the rare moment when they appear in neutral tones together, beige, gray, or white, we see a glimpse of possible harmony, as if the Ibeji are finally aligned. Ibeji, Hoodoo, and diasporic echoes. The reverence of twins didn't vanish in the middle of passage across the Americas. We see echoes. In Haitians voodoo, twins are honored through the Marasa, divine twins that parade heaven and earth. In the Gula South, twins were sometimes believed to have second sight or a spiritual channeling abilities, drawing a direct line from Yoruba to Hoodoo. Sinners doesn't flatten these beliefs. It waves them into costume, gesture, and color, treating Black spirituality not as aesthetic, but as theology. So I just have some thoughts that I have been reflecting on, and not just with the movie Sinners, but with a lot of movies that be including like African folklore or mythology. And yeah, a lot of people labeled Sinners as demonic, not just because of the vampire imagery, but because of the film lens into hoodoo, African folklore, and spiritual practices that have long been misunderstood or demonized. But let's pause for a second and ask, why is it that when Greek filmmakers reference ancient Greek mythology, no one calls it demonic? Or when Japanese anime draws heavily from Shinto or old Japanese legends, people embrace it as culture pride, not satanic influence. Yet when Black creators explore African spiritual systems, hoodoo, voodoo, ancestral reverence, it's immediately labeled as evil, dark, or demonic. Why is that? This isn't new. For centuries, African spirituality has been systematically demonized, not just by Hollywood, but by colonialism and the church itself. These systems survived slavery, survived forced conversion, survived erasure, but the stigma stuck. And even today, many Black audiences feel uncomfortable seeing their ancestral practices on screen because they've been taught to fear them. But maybe Sinners is forcing us to confront those inherited fears. Maybe it's asking, why do we accept other people's mythologies but reject our own? It's a conversation worth having, and let's discuss. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, either if you think it's demonic or even if you have other thoughts. I would love to hear. And maybe this is the part that hits closest to home. My roots are East African, specifically Kenya, and something I've noticed is that mask dances aren't as prominent as they are in West Africa. And a big part of that is the legacy of colonial religions, Christianity and Islam, which reshaped so much of our cultural expressions. Traditions were not just discouraged, they were demonized. Rituals, dances, stories that had once connected us to our ancestors, seasons, the spirit world, suddenly became things we were taught to fear or erase. Even when I used to ask my grandmother about those older traditions, about the mask dances or spiritual practices that existed before the church, she'd shy away from the conversation. She's saved Christian, and in her eyes, those things were dangerous, evil, even. But I've come to realize that fear wasn't hers alone. It was planted. Generations were taught to believe their own culture was something to be ashamed of, that African spirituality, unlike Greek mythology or Japanese folklore or Norse gods, was something dark, something demonic. Why is it that other cultures are allowed to keep their mythologies with pride, while we're told to cut ours away? Even with Greek mythology, you know that Greeks are one of the largest Christians population in the world, but they still don't believe that their mythology is demonic. That's what I feel like Sinners is wrestling with beneath the blood and the glamour. It's not just a vampire movie, it's a challenge, a provocation. It asks, what parts of ourselves have we buried to survive, and what might happen if we dared to dig them up again? Costume design and symbolism. Ryan Coogler and the costume team, pulling from archives of hoodoo practices, Yoruba cosmology, and 1930s Southern and urban black fashion, craft a visual language where every garment carries weight. Ruth E. Carter is an acclaimed American costume designer best known for her work bringing African and African American culture to life through clothing in film. She emphasized the significance of costume design in characters' development. She said costume design can be just as vital to character development as dialogue. She meticulously selected colors and accessories to reflect Annie's spiritual depth. She said Annie's wardrobe features a lot of blue, specifically teal and haint blue. She also layered Annie's outfits to reflect her spiritual knowledge and depth. These choices underscore how attire in Sinners serves not merely as clothing, but as a narrative device, conveying the character's inner worlds and cultural heritage. Larger Afro-Diasporic context, fashion as a spiritual storytelling. Carter's approach to costume design is deeply rooted in storytelling. She said, "My favorite part about costume designing is the artistry of the job. You meet with a director and a visionary to discuss ideas. You research the characters and figure out the components of their look through your own vision." This philosophy is evident in Sinners, where clothing choices are imbued with cultural significance and spiritual symbolism, aligning with the film's themes of ancestral memory and identity. Sinners doesn't stand alone. It's part of a growing movement in film, music, and fashion that actively reclaims African spirituality as a living art, rather than museum relic. This is storytelling through cloth, silhouette, and ritual gesture. Closing thoughts. Costume here is spiritual language, where each thread traces back to a root, each hue echoes a prayer, and each silhouette holds profound purpose. If you made it this far, thank you. Truly, this wasn't just a breakdown of costumes or cool camera angles. Sinners offered us something much deeper, a cinematic altar where fashion, faith, blood, and legacy all collide. We talked about suits as scripture. We talked about hoodoo as resistance, as memory, as home. We talked about how black men like Smoke and Stack have had to armor themselves in elegance just to survive in a world that sees their beauty as threat and their spirituality as sin. This wasn't just about vampires. It was about what gets buried and what refuses to die, about the stories we've inherited and the new ones we're bold enough to tell. And yet, when other cultures explore their mythologies, their ghosts, their gods, it's called fantasy or heritage. But when we do it, it's called demonic. Why? Why is our magic still feared? These are the questions I sat with as I made this. And if any part of this resonated, if it cracked something open for you, I hope you let me know. Even if it's just a black heart in the comments, I would love to hear your thoughts. It also helps the video to be seen more by people who are searching for something real. And please give me a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe for more of these type of videos. And if you like this video, you'll probably love what's coming next as well. And until then, stay curious, stay grounded, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye!